PNR with Adam R. Welcome to 3PNR. I'm your host, Adam R. And joining me for this episode is Victoria Osborn. Victoria, how you doing?
I'm doing wonderful. How are you?
Doing great. Glad to have you on and glad to have your time. Let's open up with telling people who you are. You're in, the paranormal. What put you on the path?
Okay. My name is Victoria Osborn, as he just said. I am an author. I have a gift for the paranormal, I would say. I have, since I was 3, actually, I have either seen, felt, or heard the entities that are around me. And I have gone up to heaven 3 times in my life. Only once when I died.
Huh. So you had some near-death experiences then?
Several near-death experiences. Ironically, the only one time there was a trip to what I call was heaven. Now, other people can believe what they want. I certainly wouldn't force my beliefs on them, but what I saw and felt there, I couldn't ever say it wasn't heaven.
Right.
The other 2 times were not during near-death experiences. When I have had near-death experiences after that, I don't recall going anywhere. But one time when my mother died, I was in grief and I asked God to let me see her one more time. And I really thought she was going to come into my room. But instead, I was taken up to heaven to spend time with her there. And which up in heaven, there's really there's no such thing as time there.
Right.
It's completely irrelevant to what's going on. Like I wanted 1 minute of time, and I was there long enough to do whatever I needed to do and say whatever I needed to say. So it was exactly the right amount of time I needed. And then when I came back, on Earth's time, it was 1 minute, but it wasn't the same up there at all.
Right. It felt longer, right?
Yep. Well, I mean, it's kind of hard to explain because there's not a concept there. So like, yeah, I guess to put it in our terms, it felt a lot longer because I had just the right amount.
It's like a dream state when you drink. So I have a smartwatch. I track my sleep and all that, and you see your REM state. And there's dreams where they feel like they're really long dreams. And then you wake up and you see your smartwatch register the REM state as being like, maybe 30 minutes, but you felt like you were there for hours. So,
right.
Yeah, perception of time is altered because
Absolutely.
There's no reason to perceive it where you are, whether it be in another realm or a dream state.
Right. And some people might argue that all I did was dream.
Well,
and I'm not going to, get into like the geographics of it or whatever, but I felt myself leave my body. And then I felt myself go through my ceiling and go through my attic, which I had never seen before until that moment. And then I could feel myself, like it didn't hurt, but I could feel myself going through everything. And I could feel the warmth of the sun on me. And I sleep during the daytime. So it would have been, if I was laying in bed, it would have been daytime.
Right.
And I could hear the birds. I could hear the chatter and the city and everything. And then I just, as I was going up, and then it went from the slow where I could kind of make out where there's birds and everything and all these sounds to super, super fast where I just got to this place. And everything was clear up until I got to where my mom was. And then I was only allowed to see so far. And the rest was like looking through a bad prescription of glasses. like you couldn't really make out the details. I wasn't permitted, is how I feel. I wasn't permitted to see that part yet. I was allowed only to see where my mom was. And she didn't look like I remembered her. She looked different. And the reason why she looked different is because when I remember her, she had a broken nose. She grew up, there was always a crooked nose. She always had crooked teeth. She had the flaws of her human body.
Right.
There, she did not.
Right.
Like,
she was in her whole
perfect.
form, the original form.
Yeah, her form, what should have been, was what I was seeing.
You know,
And she was perfect.
There's a lot of science. I read a study not long ago. The closest to death humans get on average are in sleep, right? Because some argue it's your astral form. Because you ever have, most, I don't know about you, but for me in dreams, I perceive myself differently than what I look like physically. I believe it's my mental self projection. And when you are in a sense, it's like remote viewing, right? When you're leaving your body, it's the energy that's going. It's not your body. It's not your physical self. The computer, your brain stays behind. It's the energy that's downloaded to that body. And so I have to believe that when you depart from this world, that you go in a raw form of energy. Your consciousness and your soul are the same thing. It's just raw energy. And
Absolutely.
some people have the software to perceive things that other people don't. I firmly believe this now. Like psychics and people remote view, and other people see even Bigfoot, for an example. Why does not everyone see it? Maybe everyone lacks the software to perceive it. If you really consider what we are, we're energy trapped inside of a fleshy machine, right?
Exactly.
And the computer, our brain, it handles the amount of data we need for day-to-day, recollection, like going to the store, you got to feed yourself. And so what we are post this world is completely different than what we understand in this world.
I agree. I believe that once we leave this world, our eyes will be opened a lot more. Barriers like language barriers will not exist. I believe that if you ever notice, if you ever gone into a haunted house, that everybody seems to speak English. And I believe the reason why is because once we're on that side, language there's not going to be a barrier between language anymore. Right. That is literally just in our flesh suits.
Yeah, that's a knowing. The way you're speaking of is that sort of communication is just a knowing. And so scientifically, when we have something like Neuralink and some of these other things, they're like chips in the brain essentially, and we can send data to and from one another with no words necessary. That's a knowing, right? And so I don't know that it's. So when you're at a haunted place and there's a spirit speaking to you or an entity speaking to you, it is conveying that message directly to the receptors of your brain. So maybe it's not speak English, but because there's a knowing there from receptor to receptor, you perceive it for the language you understand. The information's just knowing it, right?
Right. I mean, yeah, there's that angle of it, but I truly believe on the other side that no matter where they died at or what language they spoke, I believe that they know,
right? Like
the knowing, but they know how to speak the language that we can hear, we can understand. Whether they choose to or not is on them. But I truly believe that they know how to speak to us because there is no barrier anymore with the language. And that is truly just within our physical brains. So, yeah, I mean, in the sense of what you're saying, I agree. I also believe that once we're on that side, the veil is going to be removed from our eyes. So we're not just going to see what's on that side, but we're going to see everything that we cannot see in our physical forms. And I, just like you said with the Bigfoot and stuff, I truly believe that, yeah, there's probably a blind spot for a lot of people. If a person is a skeptic, they have a hard time seeing the evidence that's right in front of them as anything paranormal, even if it's obvious to everybody else. And I think it's because they have thicker blind spots than we do. And maybe it's because they're choosing to have those thicker blind spots.
Well, yeah, that's a lot of humans, right? Believe like I do. Like, look, for an example, religion in itself. Back in the day, when you read about religion and the uprise of it, and an example, another one would be in the Middle East. They were very sophisticated with astrology and astronomy. Like they knew planets, they knew stars. Most of our words that we have for planets and stars derive from Greek and Middle Eastern words. They were very into that. Later on, religion comes in and it shuts it down. It's just it's not believing the way we believe. There's the God, and so we abandon our ability to learn and perceive and be open-minded. For you, Victoria, when you're in your mind, often when you are imagining something and you want to describe it to someone, it's almost harder to put it into words than what you imagine in your mind. Now,
oh, absolutely.
Now imagine you could take that thought from your mind and transfer it to another person, and then at said point, they just know. They already know. There's not even words that are necessary for it. Perhaps they have, and our brain, I have to believe our brain has its own kind of like Google translator. You know what I mean? It's how we take an image from our brain and explain it to one another by using words. We're using basically some form of translation for the image. So for what you're saying, yeah, I'm in support of that. I think if you're on the other side, when you leave here, the organs of our body, like our eyes, vision is perceived by an organ on our body, and then it's put into the information, and the data goes to our brain, and we construct it in our brain. When you get to the other side, you bypass all that.
Right. And right now your vision is limited. Even if you have the best vision in the world, you are limited to what your brain can handle and what it can perceive. So, and they say that there's a study that says that we only use maybe 10% of our brain. I think that's fiction.
I do too.
I think it's all there. We use every part of it. We just don't use it in the way that they think we ought to be using it at this point in our
We don't use the full
evolution.
capacity of our brain, is what they're saying.
Right.
If we did, if we were capable of using the full capacity of our brain, things like race and religion and politics would definitely not matter. Because then you're seeing people for what they are. Well, it shouldn't. Sadly, it shouldn't. Unfortunately, it does. But if you're utilizing the full potential of your brain, that's bypassing the chemical reactions like emotions, right? Because now it's the computer working at its full capacity. You're understanding and perceiving things faster and better. The little differences don't matter anymore.
Well, I believe if we end up getting to the point where we could use the full capacity in the way that they're suggesting, because I feel like we still are using the full capacity of our brain, but just not in the way that they're suggesting.
Right.
In the way that they're suggesting, if we could, then we would be equivalent to God.
Yeah.
We would be able to do and create and move things the way that God would and could.
Right. It kind of an all-knowing sense, even the communications, instant knowing, instant understanding, no real reason for compassion or anger, because when you're using that capacity, you have a grander understanding. I don't think you'd have to think about what you're saying first. You completely compute it. You're not going to say something offensive. At that point, maybe you're right. That's right up there with the God factor, right?
Yeah, I mean, we would be able to instantly be able to do or say or feel whatever we needed to. And I think that we would be able to do almost what God can do, create, not just reproduce, but create life.
Right.
In our own images. And I don't think that we're going to ever reach that. In our evolution of humans, I don't think we'll ever reach that point.
Yeah, we would have to survive ourselves first, right? Because we're destructive by nature. I mean, we took atomic energy, something that could sustain many households for many years, and we took it instead and made a weapon of it, right? We harnessed the power of the sun at the tip of a rocket. And so everything
we are our greatest enemy.
Yeah, every time, every shot, everything. No matter what we do, if tomorrow Victoria invents a way to harness magnetics that can power a nation, keep their electricity on and keep them warm, cold, whatever it is, They're going to find some way to weaponize it first.
Oh yeah, by Thursday or by Friday of next week, it would be a weapon.
Yeah,
instantly. That would be used for mass destruction.
So for you, Victoria, when the paranormal, the entities you see, was that before or after the near death experience?
I started first time I saw an entity, I was 3 years old, and it was my grandmother whom I had never met. And I didn't die until I was 5.
If you don't mind me asking, what happened?
It was a child abuse situation.
Okay.
A child neglect. I busted my head open, and not just skin, but like literally the skull itself fractured and split open, and I lost too much blood, and they had to literally pry my head back together and staple it. And it was like 120 staples. Imagine a 5-year-old with 120 staples in her head.
Wow.
So like literally my head was open like if you were to hit a watermelon really super hard.
Right.
That's kind of what happened to my skull. And I was in the hospital for a month after that, but I died on the table. And it was probably not even a minute that I was actually legally dead.
Right.
You know, I don't know how long. I was 5 years old, but so it probably wasn't that long.
Right.
But at that time I went up into heaven. It was my first trip, and it was more about feeling at that point. I could feel the warmth and the peace, and a peace that doesn't make any sense on this earth. When you're in peace here,
right,
it's still chaos. It's not there. It's completely different level of peace. And I felt somebody was comforting me. And at the time, it took me a long time to realize that was my first trip. When I was 7, I went again, and I was able to see things. The first time I really didn't see anything. And a lot of people have argued that, oh, well, maybe it was just, the dream of while you were in surgery, you might not have been all the way asleep. And then maybe that was it, but it doesn't explain the knowing that I felt. It doesn't explain the peace that I've never felt here on this earth. That level of intensity.
Can you recall like maybe what you saw in that period, or is it too far?
When I was 5, I really can't. I feel like I was on somebody's lap, like metaphorically lap. I felt like I said, I felt this peace that surpasses anything I ever felt in my human existence. I remember feeling like somebody was saying that it wasn't my time, but it wasn't even so much as hearing them say it. I felt it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, like a knowing.
Like a knowing, yeah. Like right. It was just in my head. So I don't really have a lot of experience with the first one, except for feelings and thoughts, that knowing.
Right.
But when I was 7, I actually visually saw for the first time, and I was trying to kill myself. I was 7 years old, and I had been, by that time, I was being molested. I was being beat every day. I was I would go days without food. I was in a horrible situation. So I was trying to kill myself. Of course, the 7-year-old's concept of suicide is very childish,
Right.
Like I would try to suffocate myself with a pillow. Well, obviously that's not going to work, because the moment you're not able to breathe, you relax and the pillow goes up and you can breathe again. So, but I was trying at 7 years old, and God knew that that was it for me. I was done with my life. And I saw an angel. And it led me sort of, not my physical body, but my spirit. It led me kind of like up to heaven, and it formed this. It made the clouds look like there was a staircase, but it wasn't. And we just sort of floated up, and I got to see. And I wish I could tell you in details what I saw. The problem is when you get up there, as soon as you reach that realm, it's like looking through the wrong prescription.
Right.
You can't make out of the details. And I don't think I think it's because you're not permitted to until your actual time.
For one, it's terrible to hear what happened to you as a child. That's, harming children in my eyes is inexcusable and unforgivable, period. You rob them of their innocence. A child is a sponge. It's brand new energy to the world, and it's supposed to absorb all this information. And part of that information that needs to be absorbed should be love and compassion, so it's horrible. I feel bad that it happened to you. And then as far as the clouds, when you say you see the steps forming, on a few occasions, I do a lot of off podcast interviews. And I hear a lot of people of near death or leaving their body. They say something similar where they see clouds reorganizing themselves. It sounds like a portal, right? It sounds like a dimension that you're crossing into. And why you perceive what's there, I think you lack the software. I use these terms because I don't have better verbiage for it. Because in my mind, your brain and the energy in it. So your brain is a computer, the energy in it is the data of who you are. And so that when you're in that state and you're perhaps in another realm, it's very likely that you don't have the software to perceive what you're seeing there yet. Right.
No, I totally agree with that. And I feel like, not only that, but we're just absolutely not permitted yet to see it.
Right.
It's supposed to be this surprise, wonderful thing that happens when we actually are supposed to be there, I think.
And even then, when you pass on, again, I firmly believe that Earth is a proving ground, and depending on how you behave here or what your life's like here will result in where your energy goes post here. Like, in other words, Victoria has done wonderful things here on Earth. We need her here again. Let's recycle her to Earth. Or John Doe is a jerk, probably killed people. We need to recycle his energy, give him one last shot, or we send him to another realm where it's not so pleasant, where he's surrounded by his low vibrating energy. Or you've done all you could do here, and your energy is needed elsewhere. And very likely there's there's planets like Earth all around the universe, and your energy recycles there to whatever those beings are. It's an energy. It's people. They think we're going to be bipedal, two-arm human beings everywhere we go. I'm in the understanding that if your energy gets recycled to another planet, whatever that being is, whatever it looks like, that will be you. But the energy is recycled to that individual.
Yeah, it's an interesting concept and thought. And a lot of people think that science, you have to either be scientific or religious. You have to either believe in evolution or religion.
Right.
And I don't believe so. I believe that, I believe in evolution. I believe in reincarnation. I believe in God. And I see it. You said, the energy once, if they done really good, we might need them back. I think God allows us to have multiple trips on Earth if we need to, because he's not willing for anybody to perish.
Right. Energy's everlasting. We know this.
Right. Yes, it's ever, our energies, who we are, our souls has always been.
Right.
And always will be.
And so your experiences here on Earth, right? Your experiences here as a person, and this isn't, I have no factual data to support this, but this is what I'm coming to believe in all the research I'm doing. The data you collect here, like as Victoria, when you transfer back to the source of energy, that data is then stored, and then your energy could either move on, or sometimes, there's even a case, and I talk about this a lot. There's a kid who, I think it was in the 80s, could recall details of being a pilot in World War II.
My son can.
Yeah, these are details that in his time, no internet, there's no studying this. This soldier was considered lost, I believe, and the details he knew were remarkable. So that tells me that the energy was recycled but some of the residual data from his previous life was still it was still there, attached, and he was able to pick up on that residual data from his recycling. Right? Mm-hmm. I use these words. My friends ask, why do you use these words? Because it's the best way I can understand it. Like God, I don't view God as God. I don't even think the word God's appropriate. I think he's the architect, the creator of all. And I say he. It's not even a he or a her. It's just an everlasting energy, a very intelligent, everlasting enery. We speculate.
We refer to him as a he because of the fact that it's just easier.
Right.
He used to be a universal pronoun. It was just, when you see the word he and stuff in books and stuff, it didn't always mean male form.
Yeah. When I was a kid, my grandmother, Catholic woman, was telling me about God. And there was an image she had of a man in a cloak, and he had white hair and a beard. I'm like, how did they get that image? Right. She's like, her explanation at the time was something with you prophets. I'm like, well, even then, like that's really bizarre. They depicted him like a monk almost, right? Like how biased is it to say it was a he in the first place, right? I mean, when we refer to nature, it's always Mother Nature. We refer to Earth, it's always Mother Earth. And then in the creator of all, it's a he.
Right. Well, like I said, like back in the day, he was a universal term.
Right.
It did not mean male. It meant, it was like, what we say now, the pronouns for non-binary people are they or them.
Right.
Back, 100 years ago, that was the word he. Yeah. He was used like for any term, male or female. And people were like, well, how come females didn't do anything and blah, blah, blah? Because when they used the pronoun he, they were referring to male or female then. But that's a little known history fact that people don't realize. That's how much we progressed. Eventually, he was given to a male and she was given to a female. Before then, the only pronoun was he.
That's an interesting fact. That's like in the military with sir, right? Because before, I've heard it on shows and documentaries with military, and they address like high-ranking officials that are females, sir. I was like, that's
exactly.
Yeah, and it turns out
sir was a universal term. Right. Before the woke generation of that particular generation.
Yeah, because it'd be yes, sir, and then and it's only a formality for someone of high stature or ranking. So yeah, absolutely, and still today, some of the female higher ranking people would prefer the term sir when you address them, right?
Because it just always has been it was a sign of respect. It wasn't you're a male, so I'm going to address you as sir, and you're a female, I have to address you as madam. That didn't come until later on. Just like the term he was a universal term. So if you spoke about something, he did this, he did that. And it could have been a male or female, but when you spoke about it in that sense, they just use the word he.
Makes sense to me. I mean, that's our language has come a long way.
Absolutely.
In fact, like when you go to Sumerian language, they had a lesser of a vocabulary, but greater meanings behind all the verbiage, which it expressed pretty universally. All right. So for you got involved with the paranormal, right? Like researching it at the very minimum.
I was on a team a few years ago, and I actually ended up having a podcast as well that ran for 3.5 years. That friendship unfortunately ended. And when it ended, the other host of the show took over that show. It was kind of both of ours and she just took it over. So it's whatever.
Yeah.
But before I was on that team, I was investigating on my own up in Michigan with a partner. And so, yeah, I became actively involved with the paranormal, not just feeling or seeing it or, having moments or things happening to me, but actively searching it out back, I would say about 2005.
What are some of the findings you had that were, I hear a lot of pleasant findings. I want to be clear on something for a lot of people so they understand. From all the research I've done and everything we'd spoken about, these residual energies are just that. They're energy, they're raw energy. And if they want to touch you, whether it be a pleasant touch or an unpleasant touch, it's going to feel the same. It's going to be bad. They're going to manipulate energy to do it.
What people need to understand is that when you are not in your body, you have to figure out how to do things that you don't have the knowledge on how to do.
Right.
When we go to pick something up, we use our brain tells our arm.
Right.
And our muscles to do this. If you don't have an arm and muscle, you have to figure out a different way of doing it.
Right.
And sometimes when people are getting scratched or poked, they think, oh my gosh, it's this bad entity. No, not necessarily. That doesn't mean it's a bad entity. Maybe they don't quite have control of how they're handling their psychic ability to be able to, quote, touch you. Because they're not physically touching you. They don't have a hand anymore. So what you're feeling is their way of projecting a psychic ability to you. And, that doesn't always mean, just like now, somebody could, when you have muscles, there's different levels of strength. Somebody could think that 50 pounds is heavy. Some people can think 500 pounds is heavy. And I think when we're over there and we don't have our arms and legs and all the stuff that we're relying on, that we have to learn a different way. And I think it's a practice of, for lack of a better term, the working out that particular, quote, muscle.
Right.
And sometimes you have it and you can really, make things move. And other times you can barely make a noise.
Well, yeah, it's level of understanding and like you said, it's a learning curve, right?
I don't feel like every single time someone gets scratched, it's because that entity was trying to be mean to them. I think a lot of times when they're getting scratched or when they're getting poked or whatever's going on, a lot of times it's just a matter of that entity saying, hey, I'm here.
Right.
I'm right here. And they just haven't quite grasped how far they need to push that energy before you can feel it. Sometimes it's too far. Yeah.
I don't know what the percentages are for entities that are here residually, right? I think a large portion of what paranormal investigators come across here are, someone dies in a car accident, it's instant. Someone dies by a gunshot, instant death doesn't allow preparation for your energy to make the transference, right? And so a lot of them are here in a state of confusion, I believe anyway, right? Some of the things I've read about where there's relatives that visit, like in your case, they're bridging the gap to do that. But the remainder of them that are here behind and if people feel like they're haunted, it's just confused energies that don't know what's going on. They're basically, I don't want to use the word purgatory. They're between where
for lack of better terms.
Right. They're just kind of trapped here. And then that's why I hear a lot of psychics say they help these energies go to the next plane because they don't quite comprehend what happened.
Now I'm on a different wavelength on that one as far as with my experience with the death and with what I've seen or felt on the other side. When somebody passes, within the first 30 to 60 days, I feel that they go and they visit everybody that they ever knew, loved, or cared about. Just kind of check them off their list. And the reason why I feel this way is because I've seen it many, many times. I've worked with the elderly and I watch them. I do their end of life care and I watch them leave their bodies and they will stick around and they will go and visit everybody. And I think there's a window of opportunity where they can do that. And then they can choose to stay or go. And I feel like as we have freedom of choice here in our physical bodies, we also have freedom of choice after our physical bodies is gone. That we can choose to stick around here, or we can choose to hang out in, the waiting room for heaven, or, unless you're super, super, super evil bad, there where you might have to get trapped somewhere, or if you're confused, like you were mentioning. And I do feel like there is some people that died so instantly they don't even know they're dead.
Right.
And I've run across that where a lot of the times I'll ask an entity like, when was your birthday? What year were you born? What president is in office right now? And that's a question that really helps me narrow down the time frame. Because if they say, well, it's George Bush, well, then I kind of have an idea like that they didn't recently die, but they didn't die a century ago,
Yeah, it makes sense because, like you said earlier, time isn't the same in that realm, right? So
Right.
for them, it's still 2002, and
it's instant time. It's not like they're sitting there waiting around like, checking the clock and oh my gosh, I've been here forever. No, it's not relevant. So what could pass as 100 years for us might be a moment for them.
right, or they're in a time loop because they passed in that era, right? I say this because there was one person I'd spoken to, a woman in Midwestern. It's off podcast, and she said she brought psychics in, and the energy won't leave, and the energy, the primary concern of this energy was making sure one of its shows were taped on a VHS. And when I heard that, it took me back. I'm like, wait a minute, is it in a time loop where it's got to get that show recorded on a VHS, right? Because that makes me think, what, 80s, right? VHS, 80s, 90s, early,
right?
Yeah. They're in that era still, in that how they perceive anyway. Where meanwhile, it's fast forward like the 2000s, right? So,
right.
It's curious. It makes me very curious.
It also, whenever you have a house and you have a haunted house and you wonder like, why are these people walking through the walls and why are they, It's because when they lived there, the house had a door where your wall is now.
Yeah.
And they're still going the same path of their original house.
I thought that myself a couple times. Like, you get paranormal investigators go in these houses and they're searching for these entities, and the entities are looking at them like, what are these people doing here? What are they, like you said, they're walking through a wall. In their mind, you're haunting them.
Right. I mean, it's very possible. I think there's a TV show out that came out with Nicole Kidman a few years ago that was very much like that or something where was it Nicole Kidman?
I'll have to look into it.
Where
all the
way through the show, she was scared, she was shutting the windows, and come to find out she was the one that was dead, and she didn't. In her mind, she was getting haunted, but in reality, it was reversed. She was the one that was dead.
I gotta find out what the name of that show. You're the second person to mention that to me. I never even heard of it.
I think it's called Others.
Yeah, Others.
I want to say Others. It's actually a pretty cool show because it does open up your mind to the possibility of, what if we're haunting them? What if,
I've said that a lot. I've always thought that to myself because there's an individual I'd spoken to. He was investigating a case. He was an older guy in his house, and the older guy was getting violent, and he's like knocking shit over. He's like, "Get out of my house!" And so I remember hearing that, and I thought to myself, I was like, "What if the residual energy doesn't know it's residual, what if we're residual energy to it?"
You say residual energy a lot, and I wanted to. In my world as a paranormal investigator, residual energy is for me, it's a fingerprint. It is not it's not an entity at all.
Right.
It is a spiritual fingerprint. There is intelligent forms of energy. There is this energy where I think there on that side, there's entities that know 100% that they're ghosting or that they're an entity that they're
that's going to be me.
They know it.
Yeah, that's me.
And then there's Yeah, and then there's energy that don't know that they're dead, and they're living in that quote time loop. And then there is spiritual fingerprints, which is not an actual entity at all. It's a fingerprint. How do I explain this? Let's say a woman was violently raped at a spot.
Right.
Raped, not killed, raped at a spot. But because it was so violent, there a fingerprint gets left from that scene that gets played over and over and over again.
Oh, I see what you mean. So like a negative energy sticks to that location.
Sticks to that. Yeah. And when somebody comes in and they see an event that continually happens and they can't access the entity that is doing it, it's because the person that happened to may not have even died. And, so if there's a traumatic murder, there could be two quote unquote entities in a house, but one of them might just be one person and one fingerprint.
I see what you mean. So they're in a time loop, and that event is replaying for them. It's a negative energy event.
It's just a fingerprint. It's like leaving your fingerprints in a place where, even after you're gone, CSI can come in and they're like, yep, that person was there because there's a fingerprint and we saw it and we dusted and blah, blah, blah. In the spiritual world, that would be a spiritual fingerprint. It's a replaying of this traumatic event that was so traumatic, you left a piece of your soul behind.
It reminds me of the movie Constantine, where the sister jumped off the hospital, committed suicide, and in the parallel realm, she was replaying that over and over again.
Yeah. Only I think in that movie, that was her actual, like, quote unquote hell, but so it was her soul. And this way, what I'm saying, it's sort of like a home movie where, let's say, you film a 5-minute movie of an event. Well, when somebody goes to watch whatever that was that you filmed, let's say you filmed yourself, if somebody goes and watched that later, they're not actually seeing you, they're seeing an image of you. And that's, to me, what a residual energy is. Is basically a spiritual film playing of a very traumatic event that was so traumatic that you left that there. And a person could still very well be alive when that happens. And the reason why I came to this conclusion is because a few years back, I did a investigation with a friend of this house, and there was energies there, but they were not intelligent. They didn't respond. It was on a loop, and it was on a loop of basically women getting raped. None of those women died there. It was still alive.
It creeps me out because there's an investigator I'd spoken to about a year ago now, right? So just right when I started the podcast, and there's a place in Georgia where this energy continuously does the same thing. It goes in this house, and they could hear a scream, and then it stops, and then like a month later, it'll repeat every month, repeats identically. And what I never thought to ask him was that happening on the day it died. I never thought to ask that. I don't know why. Because now in my mind, if it's every month on the same day, I don't know. It's got me thinking now.
It's probably just a recording of what happened. And I truly believe that in a house where a person was brutally murdered, that you're going to get, and you might get the intelligent entity that will speak to you, but you also get that loop. And the reason why you're getting that loop is not because there's a second entity. It's because you're watching the video, spiritual video of what happened to the other person that is actually in the house. It's trying to talk to you and trying to communicate with you. So there's both levels. And there is the levels of entities that they know they're dead and they can talk to you, and they know what they're doing when they try to reach out to you. They know that they're going to walk through you if they choose to do that. And then there's the other entities that literally are living the lives that they lived in the place that they lived at. And so when they walk through walls, because in their house
there was a door
at that place, and they're just they're literally stuck in that time.
So what are some of the negative impacts you've had from investigating?
Other than the living?
Yeah. That's that's the most common thing I hear from investigators. Like, I'm like, what's the most dangerous place you went to? And they're like, anywhere there's people.
Pretty much anywhere that there's living humans is where the negative impact of like going into a quote unquote haunted house. And the reason why I say quote unquote is because I believe that there's so many entities around now that like there's going to be a haunted entity anywhere nowadays. They're not just hanging out in one house like, oh, well, I might as well just hang out here until somebody comes. No, they're not, unless they're on that time loop. I believe that entities literally are walking.
There's another factor too that
everywhere.
Humans. There's another factor, and I brought this up a few times. This is a 4 billion-year-old planet, give or take. We don't know what lived here before us. If you look at dinosaurs and why they were so large and why plants and insects were so large in that period, there was more oxygen, so they could be larger. Now, you go back to the Earth. Let's go back like 2 billion years. I don't even know what the Earth looked like. I mean, scientists speculate it wasn't formed yet, but that's scientists. We don't know what lived here, in what condition, how big it is. So how many energies do you think are probably running around today that are the energy of beings from then? Right? They predates religion.
We don't know. And I do believe I heard about somebody a couple of years ago that had an entity in their house that they actually got a picture of, and the shape of that was like a small dinosaur.
Yeah.
So, and I can't tell you if it was real evidence or if it was fake or if it was just some dust, because I didn't actually get to see the evidence to, debunk it myself. But it is possible. And, when your animal dies, it's here. There's been many times that people have had evidence of cats and dogs. I had in my previous house, I had a ghost cat. I mean, it would jump up on my bed and crawl up on my lap and lay on me. And, I would go to pet it because I am an animal owner. So I would think that, oh, it's one of my animals, but it wasn't. It was this, and I would be petting nothing. And we would see it every once in a while, and our cats would react to it every once in a while, and which was very fun.
People don't consider that, like animals, even insects, there's a brain and there's an energy driving force that animates them. They're an energy, just like us.
There's a brain, if there's emotions, there's a soul.
Right.
I truly believe that everything has a soul.
Right. So I personally, I think the soul and our consciousness are the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's the same thing. It's just an energy force within our body. And I often I wonder, like, well, how often are we seeing the spirits of animals running around? Because consider this. Some animals, like cats, one of my cats, it left. So we had a cat that would go in and out, right? Milo. Come and go as it pleases, right? It got older, it left, it never came home. We knew it died. It was old. Animals have this tendency to go die in peace.
Animals know. This is the funny thing of what people don't understand about animals is animals know that you will grieve for them. So a lot of times, if they know they're about to die, they will leave. Right. They will quote run away. And it's not because they no longer love you. It's because they loved you so much they didn't want you to see them die.
Right. Now, consider this. Milo, the cat being an example, went away, knew he was going to die. A cat gets hit by a car. It's instant. Like everything else on Earth, living things here that I think anyway, there's a preparation stage. Like most people that are dying often say they see beings or relatives, something that's giving them the warm feeling of like, look, it's time to come to us.
They are seeing them. I took care of a lady a few years ago, and I was there with her at night, and she was getting close to death, and I would watch as her afterlife family started coming around, and they would surround her bed, and they would watch out for her, and they would hold her hand, and they would pet her, and she would say, I saw my mom. Of course, people would be like, oh, well, she was hallucinating today. And I'd be like, stop writing that in the charts. She's not hallucinating.
Yeah.
She's seeing through the veil. Okay, stop writing it. And I would get pissed off about it. Like, don't write that she's hallucinating just because you can't see it.
Right.
Because I could. And I would, and one of the times that she had stage 4 brain cancer. So, and one of the times that she was more lucid, I asked her to describe what her mother looked like, because I saw in detail what her mother looked like. And she described to me exactly what I saw. And so I was like, she really is seeing her mother, and people need to stop saying that, because she would be like, Mom, and they'd be like, oh, well, she's hallucinating today. She was talking about her mom. No, she was seeing her mother. Her mom was there. Her father was there. Another person that had passed away, I think it was an uncle, was there. There was all these people around. It started getting, before she died, within the last few days of her death, the house was crowded, full of entities.
Yeah, I mean, I would imagine
move hardly. Yeah, it was like a party.
Yeah, I would imagine there'd be a greeting, right? Because your energy is like, a lot of people, me included, really don't want to leave here, right? We're nostalgic. I like this place. I like who I am. I really want to stay here. You know, if I had the means to become immortal, I'd probably take the means. However, I did watch a movie some years ago that made me think of, secondly to that. It's called Bicentennial Man. And it's about Robin Williams, where he's a artificial intelligent robot who becomes sentient and develops emotions. And he watches
about it.
Yeah, that movie changed me, because I used to think back then, like, I want to be immortal, I want to stay here forever. And I saw that movie, I was like, holy shit, how depressing is that? You know, like
Well, I mean, it would be depressing, because if you live forever, you're never able to get over to the other side where all your family is.
Yeah, not to mention, no matter who you come to adore and love in life, you're going to watch them perish, period. Mm-hmm. So you have to relive that tragedy over and over and over again.
Oh, yeah. It would be horrible.
Yeah.
But if you think about it, we are immortal. Our souls, if they're eternal, which that's what we believe,
right,
then we are immortal. The only thing that's not immortal is our flesh suits. And we don't want to live in these flesh suits forever, because we have better things to have and be. And we have a whole bunch of people on the other side waiting for us, right, that probably are watching us when we're not paying attention to them.
I think the saddest thing I've ever heard ever, I'd spoken to a guy off podcast. I made contact with him through various other people. And he reincarnates to the same exact life over and over again. And he says, he goes, when I'm 83, I'm going to die. And somewhere when I'm like 6 or 7 years old, I remember who I am again. Every time. Not a different era, not a different, same decade or same decades, same period of his life, over and over again. And I was like, gee,
that's interesting.
I thought it was cool when I first heard it. I'm like, well, you could just, and for me, I was like, that's great. I could just live me, I could make alterations. But when you hear his story, it's like, there's got to be something more.
Sounds like he's not learning whatever lesson he needs to learn to pass from that moment.
Yeah, it's bizarre, because he said usually around 6 or 7 years old, he'll start having strong deja vu. And for him, it's uncomfortable. It's like very, it's depressing. And what he ends up doing, or how he explained it to me, is that I know it's going to take place, and all I can do is do the best I can to be happy. And his story at first was like, wow, that's cool. And then I was like, damn, that's depressing. You know?
Well, I mean, and that kind of goes along with time is just a human concept. If he is dying and coming back as the very same person, that means he is on a sort of a quote time loop. But
like Groundhog
if time
Day
is just our concept, then we can literally go to any point of time. And that means that also entities can too.
I mean, I'm begging him to come on the show and tell a story. He just doesn't want he doesn't want any attention at all. And I don't
understand that though.
Yeah, I get it. He doesn't want to be harassed. That's the thing in his life. I could, like, if you were to die and reincarnate and be your same person over and over again, and you were like a celebrity, yeah,
that would
sure.
piss me off.
Yeah, but if you're a celebrity, it's cool. You're always wealthy. But this guy, he's very modest, very to himself. He's a mechanic. And so, right. Yeah, but in his opinion, he's in this weird mental state of like, what is there else. There's got to be, he goes, if there's a God, why is he making me do this? And I have
Because
no
he
answers
hasn't
for
learned
it.
its lesson.
I mean, I'm
Whatever
assuming,
lesson he's
or there was
supposed to
something, or maybe there's something he should have done for humanity. I mean, who knows, right? Imagine,
Right. Or maybe it's his own punishment.
imagine being 42 years old during 9/11. You know it's going to happen, right?
Mm-hmm.
And according to him, because it doesn't matter what timeline or how many times, no one listens until after. And then he said, I've learned just to be quiet, because then you get attention you don't need, and that particular life sucks, you know? So I'm begging him to get on the show. It's such an interesting story. We know however it is, whether it's really happening to him or he's just perceiving it that way, or he's having some weird deja vu that makes him think it's happening. It's still very interesting.
Right. I mean, we can look at it a different way. Is he recycling his own life, or is he some sort of prophet? And he's not recycling it. He just knows what's happening because he's been allowed that information.
Right. Yeah.
So what's really happening? Now my son was a reincarnation soul, and when he was just born, he kept having trouble breathing. And they've finally diagnosed him with asthma, but he had no physical evidence of asthma, but he was having trouble breathing, like when he was just born. When he started to crawl, he dragged his one leg, but there was nothing wrong with his leg physically. And you don't think nothing of those things. You're like, okay, those are weird. What's going on? When he was 18 months old, he comes out and he says, "Woman, just give me my coffee and newspaper," in a man voice. And then he went back to his, childish ways. And I'm like, coffee and newspaper? What are you talking about? Like, I literally didn't subscribe to a newspaper, and I didn't even have a coffee pot at that time in my life. I wish I could go back to those days
is
where
it
energy
possible?
naturally came.
Is it possible that an architect, however you want to name it, sees that, all right, here's this person, and I think they would be very accepting of this sort of, we're going to recycle this energy. We know this person could handle it and raise this energy.
Well, I think he lived a poor life in his previous life, and he got the opportunity to redo it. And the reason why is, as we went on, he started having horrifying real life nightmares of things that he did in his past life. He told me he was a horrible father, and I said, "What do you mean?" And he said he would drive drunk with his children all the time, and he had 2 girls, and he remembers getting into a car accident, and for the rest of his life he had a limp on that same leg that he dragged when he was a baby. And then he was in the war, and he was a pilot. He was either a pilot or an engineer. We never actually totally figured that one out, because he's got like massive, extensive knowledge of World War II planes. Like, we went to a museum and he blew their minds of the knowledge that he had.
How old is he now?
He's now 22. And he doesn't like talking about it. And he'd be mad if he found out that I was talking about, because he absolutely does not want anything to do with knowing about that life. But he used to be a gambler in his previous life, and and this is how he died. He owed some money to somebody, and he was shot in the chest in a back alley somewhere in New York. And that's why he couldn't breathe the first part of his life. He was shot in his lungs.
For me, when I get days, I have these weird things every so often. It's not often, but often enough that you have this weird deja vu. And what I mean by that is, like, you feel like something might not be right, and you get like I get like a weird feeling in my stomach. So what I do is I change the course of my day. If I had something plotted for that day, I completely change it, just because, just that feeling. It's a weird thing to say, but I'm not one to dabble with knowing. If it were up to me, I could never be a psychic. There's no way. I would be depressed. I would not do well in that scenario, right? I like to live
That's
every
why
day.
you didn't get that gift.
Right.
God knew.
I want to live every day with a new adventure and something new to discover and some research to do. I find it all fascinating, but I wouldn't want it, right?
Oh.
Like when I hear
having that gift isn't all it's chalked up to be, because like sometimes I will have a knowing, I will sense something, I will know what's going to happen for somebody, but maybe I won't know how they get to that part. Maybe I won't know everything else. And so maybe I saw, okay, for an example, I have a friend who's got a daughter. When she was 12, I saw that she was going to have a little girl. Okay. Right. So when she started having babies, she had a boy, and then another boy, and then another boy, and then another boy. She kept having kids because I told her she was going to have a girl. When she was 12, I saw the girl. She did end up having a girl on her sixth baby, because she lost one, and then she had a girl, and then she got pregnant again and had another baby that died, and then she ended up having twins, girls. I saw one girl. I didn't see the whole picture. I just saw the one girl.
Right.
So it's like, ooh, and I'm not the strongest psychic out there. There's people that are way better than me, and people that can turn it on and off when they want. I cannot turn it on and off when I want. I wish I could. There's times where I can call up an entity and I can talk to them or a person could use me like a telephone and talk to a person. And there's other times that I can't see, feel, or anything. And so, yeah, it's not all what it's chalked up to be, because it doesn't always give you the full picture. And just because you might see, like I saw a friend die in a car accident a few years ago. And I kept telling her, wear your seatbelt, wear your seatbelt, wear your seatbelt. And she refused. And in my vision, I saw that she died because of the car accident. What really happened was that she got into a car accident, was taken to a hospital where she died a month later in the hospital.
Damn.
So it wasn't exactly how I saw it, but it was enough.
You saw parts of the formula of how it came to be.
Yeah. And so, and it's hard. Like if you see somebody's death, like, do you tell them?
Yeah. That's rough.
I mean, it's really hard. Like you don't want to tell people bad news.
There's a woman in South Florida. So before the podcast, I was wanting to track down a really strong psychic, right? And there's all the ones that are advertised, and they do. I've had psychics on the show, right? Mm-hmm. But I found this woman through a chain of people. It wasn't like she does not advertise. I finally get around to calling her, and she sounds burdened. Like, she could speak to people, like she could speak to spirits, right? And so the majority of her life is harassment. She says, no matter what I do, whatever chant, they come. They want to speak, they want closure, et cetera, et cetera. Her story sounds depressing. She has no personal time. It's destroyed her relationships. She's
stronger than me. Thank God I'm not that strong.
Yeah, because she sounds like it just every day is just come. And so I said, do you ever want to come on a pod? She goes, I never want to. I don't advertise. I take no money. I just do this so I can have peace, and they leave me alone. And she's like, and I said, well, when do you find peace? She's like, I just never find peace. And in my mind, I'm like, get paid. I mean, for that ability, you can get paid, get national. But her fear is that if she does get paid, if she goes national, that's broadcasting to the planet of spirits, hey, I can hear and see you. And she's fearful that it'll just be in a bombardment that will be overwhelming for her.
They already know.
Yeah.
So. I go into a haunted place, and there'll be a place that's documented as haunted, and maybe nobody gets anything, but all of a sudden I'm getting touched. I'm hearing the voices. I'm getting reaction. Like I even physically sometimes get whatever ailment they were going through. Yeah. I will feel it on my body. Imagine going into a house and suddenly your body wants to show you signs that you have Parkinson's disease. Oof. Because the person that was there had Parkinson's. So imagine dealing with that. Or all of a sudden you are nauseous because the person that was there poisoned themselves.
Right.
So I get a lot of that sometimes. And like I said, sometimes I don't feel like I have a gift at all. And sometimes it is so strong, it is a curse, not a gift.
You probably have the software in your brain, and it's to me what it sounds like. It's not something you could channel. It's just you have the software, and when you go somewhere, spirits recognize it and they channel in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't really, there's people out there that are like, well, if you do this, you can open it up and you can channel it and you can, control it. I've never had any lessons on how to control my gift.
Right.
It either is or is not going to work. And when people are like, oh, well, and just a concept to throw out there, I just want to say this. Psychics are not all knowing. People, please stop thinking we are.
Right.
It drives me nuts. Oh, well, didn't you know? No, because I'm not God. I'm not all knowing. If I get a sense of something, sometimes I don't even know what I'm sensing. Sometimes something will come to me in a dream or come to me in a vision or come to me in a feeling. And I don't know until it happens, like, oh, that's what that was. Okay. Or I won't know all the details. Like my friend who died, I knew she was going to die in a car accident, but I didn't know exactly. Not only that, but the moment you tell somebody something, you are ultimately changing their path. If I told you that I saw that you were going to die in a red truck, how many red trucks do you plan on getting into after that? Probably none. That's going to void it out right there.
There's a movie called Time Traveler or Time Travel. The guy, so his fiance gets killed, and he invents a time machine because he wants to prevent her death. He loves her.
Oh, I seen this
one. And no matter what he did, she always died. No matter what.
And, because, and here's the thing, we don't control that. I'm gonna put that right out there. We do not control whether we live or die. When people are like, oh, well, suicide. If God didn't want you to die, or if it wasn't your time to go, suicide, you would not die by suicide.
Right.
Okay. And I can give you examples. I knew a man who shot himself right in the head, but it wasn't his time to go. So he lived the rest of his life unable to speak and seriously altered in his life, but he still lived. A person who falls out of a building, if it's not their time to go, they might live the rest of their life paralyzed. They might live their rest of their lives in deformed or in severe pain. But if it's not their time to go, they're not going to go. We don't have the control of that like people assume we do.
Yeah, I would agree. Like even said, even that movie, it's called The Time Machine, actually. And when I remember watching that, like she died in every scenario. I'm like, wow, it's just written it's written for her to happen,
Yep.
And I found it disturbing. I'm like, wow, imagine loving someone so deeply that you dedicate every waking moment to building some machine to change it, and nothing you do matters.
Right.
So,
I mean, imagine the heartbreak of that.
Yeah, like, over and over again.
Nothing matters because until you come to the realization that their death time is unchangeable, you can't move on. Like people that are like, oh my gosh, they were so selfish. I can't believe that person killed themselves. It was their death day. If they didn't kill themselves, I'm afraid to say that they would have died a different way that same day. Huh. My daughter experienced watching her father get killed in a car accident, and she blames herself. And I have to keep telling her, if he didn't die that way, he would have died some other way that same day, because that was his death date. We have a birth date and we have a death date. Those are set in stone, and no matter what we do, we can't change them. So when I'm seeing a person's death, when I get that vision or get that thought or feeling, if I tell them the only thing I'm doing is causing them tremendous fear. Because even though, let's say they died, and let's say for the example that I used earlier, the red truck, I tell you you're going to die in a red truck, so you avoid all red trucks, but your death date is set in stone. So that day you have a massive heart attack. But up until that point, you have lived in fear of that date.
Yeah.
Because now I told you, if I didn't tell you, you could have lived your life fully until that date.
Exactly why I'm grateful I don't have any ability like that, because I
Yes,
live every
it's a
day.
burden.
Yeah, I have to live every day. Like I said earlier, the new adventure, the new thing to learn. What am I going to enjoy today? You have to live that way.
Right. And then, and when people know that you can sometimes sense people's death, they're like, why didn't you sense this? Why didn't you stop it? I couldn't stop it.
Right.
That's why. Because I'm not God. I can't stop. I can't change the death date. And me telling that person wouldn't have stopped it.
That being said, now let's talk about the other force. Right. There's the lower lower vibration existence of the demons per se. What I ask a lot of paranormal people about these now. Most paranormal investigators avoid negative energy, period. They don't want anything to do with it. And I, respectfully.
It's a fact of life.
Yeah, I get it. But we still need to examine what that is. I'm under the impression personally that these darker energies, because there's been a number of cases where someone's doing an exorcist or performing an exorcism and the energy doesn't respond, stays. And I've heard from some, again, a lot of off podcast interviews where these people like nothing works, not religion, not sage. And then I think to myself, imagine throwing religious jargon at something that predates humanity and religion. It was here long before, and it's ineffective, right? So how does one deal with an energy that doesn't abide by the rules that we do?
Okay. First of all, I'm gonna put this out there for everybody. There's rarely a real demonic presence.
Right.
In what you're seeing is maybe an angry entity, somebody that has a bad attitude, or somebody that doesn't know how their own psychic strength yet. Somebody that's trying to get your attention, somebody that's maybe in a time loop and they think that you're haunting them and they're trying to get you out. There is demons and there is demonic energy, of course, but most of the time, what you're dealing with is not a demonic energy. What you're dealing with is an actual entity. And if you have an actual entity, if a human dies, their soul is in your house. If they're an asshole in real life, in their physical life, they're probably an asshole in their spirit life. And I'm so sorry.
Well, it's true. As is here, as is there. I mean, that's your energy is just basically your consciousness, right? It's who you are.
Exactly. So you are who you're going to be. And sometimes you get a hold of somebody that's completely a jerk. And sometimes you get a hold of somebody that's fed up with how you keep telling them to knock if they're there. Imagine spending, your life going around, or your death going around and people want you to perform like a monkey every time they come in the house. Imagine how that would be, how frustrating that might be. And maybe that might make you lash out a little bit. I know I probably would get really sick of it. And I would definitely get sick of people coming in and trying to provoke me. You provoke me, and I'm probably going to slap you if on the other side. I'm probably going to physically react. I'm not a demon. I'm just a pissed off spirit because you're provoking me.
Yeah, everything I've read about demons, like everything I've read, every piece of literature, every documentary, my impression is they don't want to be detected. They're not violent. They don't do this. They want to be there to attach these people for whatever negative reason, but they don't want detection. There's no outburst.
Demons are here to tempt us.
Right.
Mostly. They're the whispers in our back of our head that's saying, hey, go ahead and drink and that one more drink.
Right.
Hey, go ahead and watch that porn. Hey, they're those little whispers in the back of your head. And then you go, oh, that sounds like a good idea. And then you agree to it and you do it. And so there's
because
a lot of them. I'm not saying all of them, but a lot of them are, and they are attached to us, not places. They don't hang around in empty houses. They're attached to who we are
to
try to take us
Well, they're a
away
parasite,
from
right?
God.
And they're a spiritual parasite. I mean,
Basically,
they don't
yeah,
knock shit over. They're not knocking things over. They're not screaming because they don't want to be detected that way.
Right, because
right?
if you can detect them, you can get rid of them.
You can address
and
it, exactly.
And then you won't be tempted by them anymore. Now, and when you were talking about how people are telling you that, oh, they can't get this haunting out, because as humans have free will, so do entities. They can choose to stay or go. And, and Christians are like, well, everything has to follow in the name of Jesus, by the blood of Jesus, go. If that entity is a demon entity, yes, he has to follow that law.
Right.
If that entity is a human entity, we have free will. Right. We do not have to follow the law. If you holler into a building full of living beings, in the name of Jesus, go. People will look at you like, you go, whatever. Exactly. I ain't going nowhere. When you die, it's the same thing, because our souls are forever. And so that same personality is on the other side, and they're going to be like, you go. I'm not going nowhere. I
saw this it was a short clip a long time ago. There's a demon in this guy's house. It's demonic. It's bothering him. It's like a cartoon. I'll have to see if we can find it again. He popped in. He looked at the demon with a kind of like a smug face, showed him the DVD collection of Friends, and started watching Friends, and the demon left.
That's funny.
I thought that was hysterical when I saw that.
Right. I mean, the thing is, people are so terrified of demons because of how movies project them.
Yeah.
Movies make demons to be these horrifying, ugly creature that wants to kill you. They don't want to kill you. They want to destroy you in a different way. They want to destroy your soul. They want to make it so that they want you to live your life in such a horrible way that you will be not able to enter heaven. And they want you to take down as many people as you can with you. So like, hey, let's go drinking, let's go partying, let's go gambling or whatever. I'm not saying now, all those people, all your listeners, please do not think that I'm like against all of that. If that's what you want to do, I'm not. That's your life. It's you. You do you, boo.
Well, I mean, basically, here, another way to turn it is if you drink alcohol and you're not abusive and you don't overdo it, it means you do it in moderation. You have control over it. However,
even the Bible, Jesus turned water into wine. So he's not against you drinking. So, he's against you doing is being a drunkard and
being violent and tormenting
getting
family.
Out of your mind.
Yeah. So there's differences there. But I would imagine a demon could see a weaker person. Like, oh, I know when this guy drinks, he's going to become violent. And who knows? That's the guy. Mm-hmm. That's who I'm attached to. So
they know what tempts us. Right. They know what will keep us away from God's grace. I throw God in there a lot, and I don't, and please forgive me. If you don't believe in God, that's fine. That is your belief and you're right. And I would never, ever, ever ask you to change your beliefs.
Right.
I believe in God. So when in my explanation, it comes out like that. So I just want to put that out there. But they know what will keep you from God's grace. They know what will make your life miserable. They know what, addictions. Let's put it out there. Addictions. A person that has an addiction to alcohol and drugs, they drink and their life is miserable. Their life is miserable, and maybe they don't even see that their lives are miserable because they're drinking all the time, but their lives are absolutely miserable, and they stay in that loop, and they can't ever get anywhere. Well, that is what a demon's energy is. Now, not all there is legit cases of exorcism. There is legit cases where somebody let that influence in and it became them. But most hauntings, I would even go to as far as say is almost all hauntings are not demonic.
Right.
Almost all hauntings are entities that were alive that are now not alive. They were humans, they were animals, they were whatever souls that had flesh meat suits on at one point. And that is who you're dealing with. And because of that, they have the free will to come and go as they please. A lot of people are like, oh, well, we do sage and stuff. And now, I mean, people cook with sage.
Yeah, I was going to say.
So when they die, what are you really doing?
I don't put a lot of stock into, I'm not saying maybe it works. Maybe it was, for me, sage, I don't understand. I would have to understand the properties of it to understand why it would deflect them. I don't comprehend that.
I've used it in the past because it is a comfort for the living.
Right.
But that doesn't necessarily mean, I don't know what it does to an actual demon. I don't. And I can't even pretend to know what it actually does to an actual demon. But it's not really going to do anything to a human entity.
Right.
Yeah, maybe they'll go quiet for a while just because they know that you don't want them there. So they're going to be quiet. But that doesn't mean that they really left. It's just that, oh, they're pulling out the sage thing. They must not want us here. Let's go ahead and, we'll take a vacation for a while. But then
that's a good point. Maybe they're aware of us. We got to come back when they're unaware. Because we can't manipulate them while they're aware of us. They're aware. We got to let's leave. So maybe that's what it is. Say you like the sage and you're making, look, we know you're here. You got to go, and you can't influence someone's their subconscious or subliminally when they are aware of you. So maybe you got a point there. Maybe they see that as a sign of, well, we got to come back later. They know.
Right. I can't presume to know all that. Like I said, I'm not all knowing.
Well, for me, it makes sense because again, a demon doesn't want to be detected, right? It wants to influence in the shadow somewhere. And if you're acknowledging its existence, the likelihood of pushback in a physical realm is unlikely. Maybe they're just like, well, I can't influence this person now, but I'll wait for their guard to come down, and that's when I'll make my approach.
Right. And like I said, there has been legit cases of exorcism and stuff, and it's because for whatever reason, that demonic spirit felt like it could ruin the people the most if they possessed whoever it was that they possessed.
Right.
It could cause the most damage, but it's so few and far between. It really isn't that as common as everybody thinks, and it's certainly not like on the movies. Every time you turn a corner, oh my gosh, there's a demon there. No, it's not like that. We're not going to see them. We're going to be influenced by them because they will whisper to us. Now, on the other note, I want to make this very clear. Not every bad decision you make is because a demon influenced you. Sometimes it's just because you made a bad mistake.
Right.
We all make mistakes because this is, it's kind of a blind run for us. And even if you are a reincarnated soul, unless you literally remember day by day of that previous life, this is a blind run. Right. And so every day is new and people make mistakes. But yes, there is lots of times where
sometimes we make mistakes knowing
us to do something we like to do.
Right.
Because sin is something we like. There's never a time where we're going to be tempted to do something we don't like. Listen, we like to do it.
Let's put this out there. Some mistakes we knowingly make, right? And let me give you, and it doesn't even have to be a sin. It could be as simple as this. I know, for me personally, I like eating these spicy burritos. I know the results. It's going to give me an upset stomach, but I want it. And so when you're there, you're like, well, I know if I eat that, I'm going to get an upset stomach. It turns foul, lay in bed, but I really want it. And what happens is you're like, well, fuck it. I'm going to have it. I'm going to eat it. I'll take Tums or whatever it is. And then the results are you got an upset stomach. You made a poor choice.
But, you made a poor choice. It doesn't mean that you committed a sin. You made a poor choice.
Right.
And that is the difference. Sometimes we are miserable because of our own bad decisions, not because of some sin we did.
Right.
And that also speaks of karma. People don't realize this, but karma, if you believe in karma or the universe or whatever it is, it doesn't just punish the bad people that hurt us. It punishes us for the bad things we did to ourselves.
Right. Yeah.
Karma doesn't have they're not your bodyguard. It's not like that. Like, this person did this bad thing to you. Well, they're going to get it by karma. Not necessarily, because a lot of time karma punishes yourself. And I think it's a matter of you make choices based on how you feel about yourself a lot of times too, and that's your own karma.
Yeah.
Like get super depressed, and when I get super depressed, I want to sleep and I want to eat. Well, then I can't blame somebody else or a demon when I gain weight. I'm doing things myself, and my own karma is that now I'm going to be gaining weight and I'm going to be miserable. If you drink a lot, your own karma is that you're going to probably lose your job. You're going to, a lot of times karma punishes us.
It's a weird thing with karma, even with depression. I get depression, and I've had it my whole life. But when I recognize when it's coming on, the first thing I do is, how do I distract myself? Because really, depression's a state of mind. And so what I'll do 9 out of 10 times is I'll watch something like, right?
There's a scientific thing about depression too. I mean, I don't mean to interject, but sometimes depression is not just a state of mind, but there's actually physical evidence of your brain, your electricity in your brain. Let's put it that way, because I can't think of the scientific term for it, is misfiring.
Right. So,
so there's
a chemical imbalance.
Physical thing that happens that causes depression. And yeah, you can distract yourself. But sometimes it's just, you have to look at mental health the same way you would look at your physical health.
Yeah.
If you broke your arm, you would go and get it set. If something's going on in your brain and is causing severe depression, it's not always just a state of mind. It's a sickness, and you have to get help for it, because something might be misfiring.
Right. At that level, I don't think the depressions I get are chemical or neuron related. Mm-hmm. Mine are just an emotional thing that it manifests mentally. And like I said earlier, I throw on documentaries, and before you know it, whatever I was feeling, thinking, or prior to that is lost, because I'm one of these people. If I learn something, like an example, I was depressed the other day over a lot of shit going on right now, and I threw on a documentary that was about space. And before I knew it, I'm taking notes on them. I'm imagining, well, what is on the edge of the universe, and what can we do? And so I distracted myself. It's not easy for everyone, right? Yeah, there's some people out there, people I know personally, that it's a chemical thing, and it's really tough to beat.
Right. And that's the difference. I think I would call that sadness.
Yeah.
Over depression. And the only reason I clarify it like that is people sometimes call sadness as depression. The reason why I differential them is because sometimes I'm sad. Sometimes I just had a bad day and I'm just sad, and I can distract myself with a movie, or I can distract myself with a good book or some thing that I can do to distract myself. But depression is different. It's a sickness that I can't distract myself from. No matter what I do, no matter what I put in front of me, it's still there.
Right.
Because there's something going on.
So how do you combat it? How do you combat it?
How do I come back? Sometimes the best way to come back is to go through. Gotcha. And I know that sounds really like what? Sometimes instead of staving it off and trying to, eat your way out of it, or sometimes the best way to do is just like, okay, this is happening, and just crying it out and trying to just cleanse yourself.
Right.
And trying to get back. Now, sometimes you can't, because it's a misfiring of your brain, and you need to have medication that will help block that misfiring.
Yeah, see, that lets me know that I'm not having a chemical thing, because I'm a weird person. When I start feeling
sadness.
Yeah, for me, it's always like little events in life that take place, and it affects me. And so what I end up doing is I get pen and paper. Yeah, I start writing it down. All right, what's going on today? Let's write this down. Let's figure out the pros and cons of my day, and how do I eliminate it for tomorrow?
Right. And when you're sad, you can bring yourself back. It's very easy. You just, like you said, you distract yourself. You change your mind setting. I don't know how many times I've been like in severe depression mode, and somebody's like, well, just have happy thoughts. Okay, well, that works if you're sad.
Yeah.
Because if you're sad, you can counter it by having happy thoughts and thinking positive. That will counter it.
Some other people have to correct the chemical.
That's not going to help. You can have all the positive thoughts in the world, but your body and your mind is physically reacting to the depression that's set in.
Yeah.
It's a whole different scenario. And sometimes the only way you can come back from that kind of stuff is by medication or is by allowing it to happen and getting through it. Just sort of like allowing yourself to get chickenpox so you can get the immunization for it.
Right.
Or, sometimes you kind of have to go, okay, this sickness, quote, sickness is going to happen. So let me,
or you have to
do what I need to do and take care of myself and get through it.
Yeah, or correct it chemically, right? You have to get it chemically treated, like most
and
things.
a lot of times, if you are getting where you're feeling severely depressed, one of the first thing I tell you that's easy to do is drink water, because sometimes water
hydration
can help you eliminate some of your toxins in your body that's causing those missteps.
Are you going to do another podcast? You should. Or look, at the very minimum, do a vlog, right?
Yeah, I mean, I have on YouTube, if you go to Paranormal Ragdolls.
Yeah, I've seen it.
I have a show there. I haven't done it in a really long time because I needed to step back. I stepped back a little bit from the paranormal community.
Sure.
And I just needed to reevaluate myself. I end up writing 3 books so far, and I have a 4th one on the way. They are what they are is sort of the interviews by writing instead of actually talking to people. And they're each 100 pages, called Blood Moon Chronicles, and they're each 100 pages full of interviews that I've had with celebrities of the horror genre or paranormal community or even sci-fi. And that's what I've been doing while I've been taking the step back.
So why don't you and I set up another podcast together where we just talk about that, where it's the celebrities and some of the things you discovered in that realm as well?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, I'm going to schedule you for that again. We're at the hour and a half mark. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk to Victoria in post. So anyone listening, good day, good evening, whatever it is for you, but I'm going to talk to Victoria in post.
All right.